Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com. I am your co-host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host, Sam Teets, our NFL beat reporter. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about you?
I'm a Bengals fan, so hell, I'm doing all right. At least we didn't get blown out. But the Cleveland Browns last night beat the Bengals 35-30. The things I took away is this. Number one, there's only a shot for two teams to make the playoffs out of the AFC North, and neither one of these teams is it. The other thing I took away from this is if Joe Burrow ever gets an offensive line in Cincinnati, he's got a chance to be special because last night, 37 for 61, 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, and it seemed like he was hit on almost every play, Sam.
Yeah, the only really bad throws I thought he had usually came when he was running, he was scrambling, he was off his feet kind of trying to throw the ball and just make something happen. But you're right, they didn't have any time at all. I mean, Myles Garrett, you talked about Myles Garrett the other day. Myles Garrett was a problem last night. I think he had 1 sack. Of course, that forced football turned into a touchdown for Cleveland. But he also had like 3 or 4 quarterback hits. They couldn't block Myles Garrett. They couldn't establish the running game either. Joe Burrow was running for his life. He's basically a one-man show out there.
Well, the thing that's a joke is the fact that Bobby Hart's the starting tackle and Fred Johnson is the starting guard, and those two guys are horrible. And half the time, guys would run by them. And the thing that blew my mind is you've got this quarterback that you've put all this money into, and you're going to roll into right behind Bobby Hart, which seems really stupid. And, I mean, Zach Taylor is the problem here. The entire coaching staff in Cincinnati is the issue. I've been saying this forever since they hired a guy that did not have the resume to be a head coach in the NFL. And the more I watch them, the more disgusting it gets. And it's kind of like back when everybody wanted to get rid of Marvin Lewis. I was like, sure, Marvin Lewis deserves to lose his job, but what are they going to hire him to? What are they going to replace him with? And they've replaced Marvin Lewis with something even worse.
See, that's why as a Steelers fan, I don't want to fire Mike Tomlin, because if we did, I assume we would get something worse. I have a question for you. Do you think there's a chance Zach Taylor gets fired at the end of this year or before the end of this year?
Probably not, but he should. Now, the only saving grace here is the fact that Mike Brown's got so much money in this quarterback that, I mean, what I saw, if the protection doesn't improve, I do not see how he can survive the entire season. And I know you got to chip guys, you got to block them. But my thing is this, and I talked about it yesterday on the show. When they went 5 wide yesterday, Sam, almost every time there was a completed pass and a positive play and not much pressure, correct?
Correct.
Why do you not go 5 wide all the time? I mean, when I look at this, when you go 5 wide, if the other team plays man and they use a safety, you're 5-on-5 in the box. If they use the safety to cover somebody, or if they don't use the safety to cover anybody and they put him in the box, you got 6 guys to block 5. Now, I still like that better than allowing Cleveland to run 7 or 8 guys in the box and we have 5 or 6 guys. Or the 7th guy, and the 7th guy's a running back or a tight end that doesn't block that well. So my problem is it's not so much that they don't have the players, because they don't. And when people can say, well, Zach Taylor can't get them to block, Zach Taylor and, Turner, the offensive line coach, both wanted Bobby Hart. They gave him a 3-year, $21 million contract. So don't tell me that this is not on the coaches, because if you don't have the players that can get it done at a professional level, it is your job to go out and find somebody that can. I find it really hard to believe there's not somebody out there on a practice squad that's better than Fred Johnson and Bobby freaking Hart. Bobby Hart was a bust in New York for years, but yet the Bengals signed him. He was horrible last year, so they re-up him 3 years for $21 million. Joe Burrow's got to be shaking his head, wondering what he's got himself into right now.
Yeah, because look at this way. Joe Burrow's an incredibly talented quarterback. I know they didn't win the game last night, but I think he showed splashes of that greatness he has. My concern about Joe Burrow is how am I going to survive in the NFL through my first contract? I mean, really, behind that Bengals offensive line, how am I going to get 5 years down the line? What am I going to look like if I have to keep playing behind this line?
Yeah, and the thing is this. I mean, you got guys like Jonah Williams, has good technique. He does a lot of the right things. But my question is, where is he going to get his coaching from to develop as an offensive lineman? It's not like you've got Jim McNally, who was with Cincinnati in the 80s, who, helped develop Anthony Munoz, Max Montoya, and one of the great offensive lines in history. You get this Turner dude that was the coach at Texas A&M. And he was the offensive line coach there. And I mean, I don't remember any great offensive linemen coming out of Texas A&M over the last few years. And then when I look at the defensive side of the ball, Nick Chubb runs for 124, Kareem Hunt for 86. Nick Chubb carried the ball over 20 times, averaged almost 6 yards a carry. Kareem Hunt 10 times, averaged almost 9 yards per carry. So Baker Mayfield, to me, from what I see, is an arrogant little prick who's not going to make it very long in the NFL. But right now, he is being saved because he has basically $1 million backfield.
That backfield's probably the best in football, and they got Kareem Hunt basically at a discount this summer because of all the issues he had off the field, so they didn't have to pay him very much. But you mentioned that it was going to be a problem. Cincinnati's interior defensive line was going to be a problem with Geno Atkins hurt. It basically would be DJ Reader or whoever else was there. And that's kind of what it was last night. The interior didn't hold up very well. The linebackers haven't been able to keep up with the running backs. It's been a whole problem for the defensive front for Cincinnati.
Yeah, and we watched it, and to me, Jesse Bates is a stud on there. I think Josh Bynes is a really good player. Reader's a really good player. Alexander's a good player. Von Bell's a good player. Sam Hubbard's good. Carlos Dunlap. My only problem is that's like 7 or 8 guys. And you can't play defense with 7 or 8 guys. You got to have some depth. There's no depth here. You also had Mike Daniels, who was the immediate backup to Geno gone. So I can give a little bit of grace on that. But when I look at Jermaine Pratt, he is the perfect example of the defensive coaches have no clue what they're doing. This is a guy that usually in college played with his hand in the dirt and played defensive end. So what did the Bengals do? Or outside linebacker? What did the Bengals do? They put him at middle linebacker. It's absolutely stupid. And the thing is, last night, he had 1 tackle and 1 assist as the middle linebacker. Last week, he had a bunch of tackles, but the problem was the tackles were 7 or 8 yards down the field. Jermaine Pratt does not shed blockers well. He does not have the instincts of a middle linebacker. So they're playing him out of position again. I mean, this is Vontez Burfict. Vontez Burfict was a middle linebacker. The Bengals made him an outside linebacker. He was still a really good one, but you got to put guys where they're comfortable, where they can play. And if Jermaine Pratt is playing on the edge in college, what in the hell would make anybody think he can play middle linebacker in the NFL?
And this goes to coaching and personnel decisions. They've not constructed this roster very well. They haven't added no depth here. You mentioned linebackers. They got Josh Bynes there. You got Pratt. You got a guy you drafted, Logan Wilson, Akeem Gaither-Davis there as well. But you basically got a lot of youth there. You don't really have the development there yet to have real starters.
Well, and that's coaching, because last year there was a point in the season, at the start of the season, they only had 3 linebackers on the roster. So I think the problem is Opie Taylor doesn't believe linebackers are that big of a deal. The only problem is they are. And when you don't have them, you've got an issue. Now, I think they do have guys like Bynes, really good player. But you've also got to have depth on the D-line. And we saw once you removed Adkins and Daniels, there's a significant drop-off beside DJ Reader. And the problem is, to be really good at linebacker, you need defensive linemen that can take up 1 or 2 guys and limit the amount of contact the linebacker has with the offensive line. They don't have that. And when I look at the Cleveland Browns, I see the same bad coaching. I mean, you're up by 8 points, 21-13. You got 4th and 3 at the 5 or 6 yard line, and you go for it? I mean, you're up 21-13. To me, that's 1 score and a 2-point conversion. You want to kick the field goal to go up 11. And to combine this with the fake punt last week, I think the Cleveland Browns are in desperate crap too. And they're kind of like the Bengals, where there's enough pieces there if you had the right person to put the pieces together, but neither the Bengals or Browns do.
Yeah, offensively, they've got all the weapons they need. And the offensive line, I mean, even beat up last night, they kind of held the Bengals in check in terms of their pass rush. They did okay. The pieces are there. The health isn't right now. And again, like I said, the coaching decisions are just making you question just scratch your head. The Browns could have lost that game if not for Myles Garrett strip sacking Joe Burrow. And then that turned into a touchdown. If they didn't get that, they had an opportunity to lose that game.
Yeah. And I mean, it's sad because when you see both of these teams, it's not like they're the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, there's talent scattered all over both of these rosters. The problem is you got to have somebody that can coach it. And much like Jacksonville, they don't have anybody that can coach it. And until they do, both of these teams are going to flounder and struggle. The one saving grace, if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan, is the fact that until he gets hurt, you'll get to watch Joe Burrow.
Yeah, you will. I have a question for you. What about Joe Mixon? I know you gave him a contract extension this offseason, and he really has struggled early in the year. Is that more Joe Mixon or is that the offensive line?
It's more the offensive line. Last year, I think he averaged under 2 yards per carry for the first 8 weeks. They adjusted to wet his zone blocked. It got a little bit better towards the end of the season, but the schedule also got easier towards the end of the season. I wouldn't blame anything here on Joe Mixon. I think this is just a lack of being able to call an offense, structure an offense. And to me, Zach Taylor, who I like to call Opie, is a dude that gets most of his playbook from hanging out playing Madden with the defensive coordinator.
And Steve Rizzer brings up a good point in our chat here over on the right side of our screen. He says the Bengals and Browns hired offensive coordinators, not head coaches.
No, they didn't, Steve, because I don't think that Opie Taylor was an offensive coordinator anywhere. He was the quarterback's coach with the Rams. So he wasn't even an offensive coordinator. And the problem is they hired him as the head coach. But he made himself the offensive coordinator also. So I don't think he's ever really called the plays in an NFL game, and he's never had to manage a game as an NFL head coach. So now you expect him to do both, which is why you end games or end halves with almost no timeouts at all at any point because of so much disorganization, worried about delay games, so you got to burn a timeout. So I think this was Kevin Stefanski. At least there was an offensive coordinator pedigree. The only thing that Opie Taylor had was he was 38 years old. He was young, however old he is. He's young, and he was around Sean McVay. And I think, as we saw with Sean McVay, when he had really good players, he won games. Now I think Sean McVay is going to struggle. And I think Opie Taylor is going to struggle because I don't think he has a clue what he's doing. I think he's in way over his head. And this is just part of the problem with the Cincinnati Bengals, which is Mike Brown. When it came time to hire a head coach, anybody that could do the job didn't want the job. And I'm pretty sure that Eric Bieniemy wanted a job. Eric Bieniemy's been an offensive coordinator, and you can say, well, Andy Reid probably controls most of that. But that I would rather have the guy that's been studying under Andy Reid than the guy that's been studying under Sean McVay. I mean, to me, that's kind of a no-brainer.
Well, yeah, and that guy just won a Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. So I think you could say there's definitely better pedigree there than for anyone Sean McVay's produced so far.
Well, how about this? I think the big thing, because I coach quarterbacks, and the big thing with coaching a quarterback is, do they look like a quarterback? So when they get off the bus, you can usually tell at any level who the man is there, who the quarterback is. It's the same thing with the head coach. The head coach has to have a presence. It's not how much he knows. It is the presence he gives, that he is in charge. Everybody knows he's in charge. The fact that I call Zach Taylor Opie Taylor will tell you I don't think that he has that. To me, he looks like a young dude who's in way over his head. Yeah, Doug Peterson was an OC under Andy Reid. Perfect example. I mean, and really, it's not so much the fact that, it's just the fact to me that Opie Taylor is not qualified to have this position. It's an absolute joke. It's a disgrace. And I think it's great that Bengal fans have decided to boycott the games, and there was nobody in Paul Brown Stadium last week.
Yeah, well.
I don't think there'll be anybody in there next week either.
Probably not. I mean, it's just I don't understand how someone like Bieniemy is not not hired as a coaching spot, especially because there are so many poor, struggling coaches in the NFL right now. I don't understand how he doesn't have a job. Someone like Zach Taylor, who did not have the credentials to get one, is currently coaching the Cincinnati Bengals.
Hey, let's face it, Marvin Lewis had the credentials to be a head coach for 2 or 3 years before he got the job. It's the why the Bengals got him. He got tired of waiting, didn't know if he was going to get another opportunity, so he took the opportunity with Cincinnati. And for all those people say Marvin Lewis is a terrible coach, I'm not a big Marvin Lewis fan. I don't think he was a great game manager. But I also think Marvin Lewis was thrown in a place where it's damn near impossible to win because you've got an ownership that has their hands too much in anything. And everybody can say, well, in the offseason, they did this in free agency. They did this in the draft. But my problem is, yeah, they did that. They still had money left. Maybe they could have got a right tackle. Maybe you don't blow $21 million on Bobby freaking Hart. Maybe you go and sign just an average free agent, which would be a hell of a lot better than Bobby Hart's fat ass that can't do anything. I mean, literally, Bobby Hart has no heart. He has no competitive fire. When you watch him, it's almost like watching a bad high school lineman where the dude will blow by him, and instead of going down and trying to block somebody else, he just turns around to watch to see how much damage his lazy ass just did.
Well, then you got the Bengals have their scouting department, which is basically non-existent. So you're basically only picking guys you've seen in premier television games, guys you've seen play big games, and you haven't really scouted at smaller schools to find any gems or anyone like that.
No, and when's the last time the Bengals found a gem? I mean, it's been a while. I mean, they used to all the time when they had Paul Brown. But when you got Paul Brown, you don't need a huge scouting staff because he'll find guys like Kenny Anderson from Augustana, Ken Riley and Lamar Parrish, who were both college quarterbacks. He turns them into cornerbacks, and they end up being two of the best cornerbacks that ever lived. You know, he did that stuff repeatedly with players. You know, he found guys that nobody else thought was that good, and he turned them into Pro Bowl players. The problem is that coaching doesn't exist here. That scouting department doesn't exist here. And as long as it doesn't, the Bengals are going to struggle. And it's a damn shame because from what I've seen of Joe Burrow, he's always cracked up to be. Because I don't think there's too many guys that could take a team with this bad of run defense and this bad of offensive blocking, throw for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, not throw a pick, and score 30 points. And he still lost the game. And see, I think people forget, without being able to stop the run, it limits how many times Joe Burrow gets the ball. And also with a defense that gives up a score on almost every possession, it makes it even harder to run the quarterback because you're likely to force things because you know if you punt the ball, you're giving up 3 or 7 points every possession.
Yeah, and they haven't had a running game at all. It's been all on Joe Burrow. Now, if you're asking him to throw 60 times a game in the future, that'd be very difficult to sustain at any level of play. So that would be hard for them moving forward. But
Nobody wins that way unless you play. Yeah, unless you're playing college football at Washington State or Texas Tech, you don't win that way. And the thing is this, even at Washington State and Texas Tech, you never see them in the college playoffs.
Yeah,
you know, because eventually they're going out there in Oklahoma to play football. Yeah, they eventually run into an Oklahoma or a Washington or a UCLA that plays football the way it's supposed to be played. All right, next up, we are going to discuss all the Week 2 games. We're going to start off with Sunday at 1 o'clock. The New York Football Giants, 0-1, coming off a tough loss on Monday night at the Chicago Bears, who are 1-0. Mitchell Trubisky against Daniel Jones. Sam, who do you like?
Well, obviously, I like Daniel Jones better than Mitchell Trubisky. Trubisky basically got hot in one quarter of a game that ended up helping them win. But I like Chicago's defense significantly better. I don't really know about Judge yet. I'm still kind of making up my mind on him and his coaching staff right now. So I'm going to lean the same way I did last year. I'm going to lean towards the Bears winning a narrow game.
All right, I do too. It wouldn't surprise me if the Giants win this game because I really think, and this may sound crazy, but I think the Giants and the Redskins, one of those two are going to challenge for this division this year. Now, a lot of that reason is because I don't think anybody's winning more than 8 games, so everybody's going to be in it till about week 14 anyways. But I really think we're going to see either the Giants or the Redskins maybe jump up and surprise some people. That's not because they're any good. That's because of the division they're in. But I'm going to go with the Bears in a close game also. Next up, the Los Angeles Rams will travel to Philadelphia to battle the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles coming off a rough loss to the football team last week. And the Rams coming off a big win over Dallas, Sam.
Yeah, I'm going to pick, and this goes against everything I've done in the past. I'm going to pick the Rams here just because the Eagles, they're still banged up. They got some guys coming back, but they're still banged up on the offensive line. The Rams actually played significantly better defensively than I expected them to against Dallas last week, and they have much more weapons than Dallas. So I'm going to go with the Rams. I think the Eagles are a better team. I think they're a better coach, but I think the Rams just have an advantage because of injuries right now.
All right, Steve likes my Giants in an upset, and I could see that happening. I'm going to go with the Rams also because I don't see how you can have backup offensive linemen and block Aaron Donald. So I think Aaron Donald's going to cause all kind of problems. I think it'll be a close game. Carson Wentz will make some plays to keep him in it, but I like the Rams to eke this one out in the end. But just like the other one, it wouldn't surprise me either way. I think there's a lot of games this week that are kind of toss-ups. Another one of those that is kind of interesting to me is the Atlanta Falcons against the Dallas Cowboys. And when I look at this, I never trust the Cowboys, but I never trust the Atlanta Falcons defense, especially one that's coached by Raheem Morris. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys to win this game fairly comfortably, Sam.
Yeah. You might underestimate Dak Prescott's ability to throw the ball. Maybe Ezekiel Elliott's ability to run. Maybe he just won't put in a defensive game plan. Who knows what he's going to do there? So I'd take Dallas as well because it just doesn't – I can't pick Atlanta after that. There's no way.
Yeah, maybe Raheem won't know that Dallas is planning on playing offense this week.
And maybe just be able to take a week off. Maybe let's say,
what was Raheem said about Seattle last week?
What was it? It was like I didn't plan on the passing game or something. I didn't plan on Russell
Yeah, I
Wilson
didn't plan
being
on
that
Russell
ball.
Wilson to really throw the ball.
I mean, there's nothing you can say to that, right? There's no comeback for that.
Do you know what that tells me about Raheem Morris?
What?
He has put himself in line to be the next Cincinnati Bengals coach.
Hey, you know what? Why not?
Or the Cleveland Browns. He could go to either one.
Either one.
All right, next up, the Carolina Panthers, who lost a narrow game last week to the Las Vegas Raiders, will travel to Tampa to take on the Buccaneers, who are still kind of licking their wounds from getting beat up in the Superdome. Who do you like here, Sam?
You know, it'd be tempting to pull the upset here and just go for the Panthers, but the Buccaneers shut down Christian McCaffrey last year. I think there are 2 meetings that allowed fewer than 100 total yards from scrimmage for McCaffrey. And that really is Carolina's offense. So I think Buccaneers are just a safe play here.
Yeah, I think the Buccaneers also. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers will travel to New York to battle the Jets. I'm going to go with the Niners. They just got more talent. But I do have enough questions here about the Niners receivers and Jimmy Garoppolo and the play calling to think that it's not beyond comprehensible that Sam Darnold could just play out his ass and they'd have a shot here.
Yeah, but they're missing Jamison Crowder, and he was their top receiver from week 1. So, and Denzel Mims not back yet either. So they really don't have many receiving weapons in New York right now. 49ers added Mohamed Sanu. I don't think that really helps them at all because Sanu got cut from New England, and New England needs receivers.
If they would have added the 2013 Mohamed Sanu, it would have been a huge addition.
Yeah, but not right now. I would go 49ers as well. I think it's going to be a comfortable win.
All right, next up, the Denver Broncos, who for some reason you expect something out of this year, will travel to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. And I'm betting since you're a homer, you're not expecting much from the Broncos this week.
No, not at all. The Broncos scored 12 points last week against the Titans. I think Pittsburgh can hold them to 12 points or at least under 20. I think Pittsburgh's going to go out there and win this game fairly comfortably as well. 10 to 15 points.
I think Pittsburgh smacks them. I think this is the week Big Ben goes down for the first time.
Yeah, don't say that.
What?
That's actually probably a fairly accurate one to say because if Belichick gets them,
he's almost played a game for him. All right, next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Tennessee to take on the Titans. I think this is a no-brainer to me, Sam. I'm going with the Titans.
Yeah, I would too. But I'd be interested to see how Jacksonville approaches this game. It's either going to be a close game or they get absolutely blown out. I think it'll probably be a blowout. I think Derrick Henry will run all over them for 150 yards. I think the Titans probably have this one.
Sam, I never heard nobody on a Pick'em show go, it's going to be one of two things. It's either being a close game or a blowout.
Hey, I'm going Tennessee. I would go Tennessee. There's no doubt in my mind. Tennessee.
I'm going to start calling you the master of the obvious. Next up, the Detroit Lions will travel to Green Bay to take on the Green Bay Packers. This is one that I think will be closer than people think. I think Matthew Stafford will be able to score some points. I think the Packers end up winning this game by 7 to 10 points, though.
Yeah, after the way Aaron Rodgers played last week against the Minnesota defense, which just has its problems, but it's significantly better than Detroit's, I don't think I could pick against the way Rodgers is playing right now.
How about this? I don't know that I think Minnesota's defense is definitely better than Detroit's.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think either one of them is very good. Next up, the Buffalo Bills will travel to Miami to play the Dolphins. You always got to worry about whether this is the game where Ryan Fitzpatrick will look like a Hall of Famer because he does that twice a year in a 16-game season. But I'm going to bet it's not here. I know the Bills are down a couple linebackers. Not sure if they'll be back or not. But I think the Buffalo Bills will handle the Miami Dolphins in Miami.
Yeah, I think they're missing Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano at linebacker. But really, the strength of this team has always been a little bit of the defensive line, the secondary anyways. So Buffalo should win this fairly easily. I don't have faith in Miami's new format yet to actually go out there and win games because we clearly won't see any wins, I think, until Tua takes over.
All right, I think this one's one of the more interesting games to pick on the week. The Minnesota Vikings will travel to Indianapolis to battle the Colts. What do you think, Sam?
You know what? I don't want to pick the same one as you because we need some diversity here, but I think I'm going to take the Vikings. I'm going to go with the Vikings.
Come on, we keep picking the same things.
Oh, come on. I was trying to think. I'm like, Mike will take the Colts. So I'm like, Mike will take the Colts. So, I'll go Vikings.
Mike personally hates the Colts. So.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime I think teams in doubt, I'm picking against them.
I'm just picking the Vikings. So I think what we saw from Frank Wright last week, which is unacceptable. I don't know if they're going to correct that or not. I think Minnesota has a better chance to win games, even though their offense also had mixed days last week.
All right. I still think it's a toss-up. Oh, what the hell? I'll go with the Colts since Sam went with the Vikings. I think it's 50-50. We disagree this way. I think Phillip Rivers may be able to do enough here. And my question is the Vikings play calling. Will they get back to the run of Dalvin Cook, and which they did last week, but there was very little play action. I think if they go back to the play action game here, I think they can be successful. I don't think they're going to with Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. I think the Colts squeak this one out. Next up, the Washington football team will travel to Arizona to play the Cardinals. This is a battle of undefeated Titans, Sam.
Yeah, two dominant teams that have been winning games for the past couple of years. And when I say games, I mean 2 or 3 games every year. But I think it's going to be closer than people expect. I mean, Kyler Murray clearly has the advantage here at quarterback. It's not even close. But Washington's defensive front against Arizona's really weak offensive line, I think there's some chance here for an upset. You know what? I'll pick Washington. I'll be the guy who does it. I'll pick Washington.
All right. I'll pick Arizona because the other thing is this. Even if they get pressure, Kyler Murray can move around very good in the pocket. I think he picks them apart. And I think the bigger issue here is how will Washington score points? I think this ends up being an Arizona 31, Washington 13 type of game. But it really wouldn't surprise me just because of the defensive line. If it's closer to what I'm saying, I'm just going to go that I just think the Cardinals are a better team. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens, who look like one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NFL, will travel to Houston to battle the Texans, who did not look like that. The Texans have no defense. The Texans have no chance in this game. Baltimore wins this game easy, Sam.
Yeah, by 30 points possibly. I mean, we saw what the Chiefs did. We saw what the Chiefs did to Houston. It's going to be more the same this week.
All right, next up, those same Kansas City Chiefs will travel to Los Angeles to battle the Chargers. I keep having to stop myself from saying San Diego. But the Chiefs at the Chargers, there's no Derwin James. There's no chance here for the Chargers, Sam.
No, there isn't. And we saw what Tyler Taylor did last week against a Bengals defense that just gave 30-something points to the Cleveland
Browns.
And
the Bengals dominated them defensively last week.
Yeah, so I would say there's no hope here.
No, I think this game ends up 75-0. Next up, the New England Patriots will travel to Seattle to battle the Seahawks. This is very interesting, and my take on this game is this. I don't think that the Patriots could possibly score more than 17 points in this game, and I don't think the Patriots could hold the Seahawks under 20. So I think with those two things being said, I look for a Seattle win 34-14, something like that, Sam.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's Jamal Adams is Cam Newton's worst nightmare. That's a safety that can hit you like a linebacker and play coverage like a corner almost. So I don't think Cam Newton's going to be able to counter Jamal Adams in the secondary. There's Quandre Diggs and Shaquille Griffin back there as well. I just don't think they have an answer offensively.
All right. NFL news, Sam. We got the Raiders and the Saints will play Monday night, but we'll talk about that on our show Monday as we recap all of these games. Any NFL news you want to talk about?
He did just lose a tight end of hers going towards Achilles. He's going to IR. What's his name? It's CJ Ozuma. Is that how you say his last name? He's going to IR.
Yeah. Uzama.
Yeah, torn Achilles, right. So he's done for the year.
How about this? Trend in the sports world. NFL TV ratings for week 1 of the season are down at nearly every turn. The season started with a dramatic decrease in viewership for the Chiefs-Texans. Now the Monday night ratings. The Steelers at the Giants game drew 10.8 million, down 21% from the early opener last week. Titans-Broncos drew only 7.7 million, down almost 40% from the late last year game. What do you attribute that to, Sam? Do you think it's all the politics in it? Do you think it's the fact that there's no crowd, that you got the COVID? I mean, what the hell's going on here, Sam? If you're in the NFL and you're an owner, you want to know.
Yeah, I would think a little bit less of the political stuff because, honestly, I've watched some of the broadcasts and I really didn't see much of it, really. So I think
what I mean? We're talking about the knees and the ESPN and the way they push it, and you even see the commercials for it during the games.
Oh, I don't watch. I turned my headphones on. I had the commercials going. I don't like pay attention to that. So maybe there's more.
We saw a commercial right after the game started last night. I don't really care either way. I'm just asking, what is the problem here? Is it an oversaturation over the years?
I think it's the NFL believing that it's above criticism to some degree. and kind of just going and doing it once. I think not having fans in the stands, not having that atmosphere alters it a little bit differently. I think it's just a lot better. I think people are just kind of tired and worn out, and they're finding better ways to relax than just watching football at this point.
What's better than watching football, Sam?
Nothing in my opinion, but I think there's other people who are like that. They're not
Really,
diehard
I
football
could see
fans.
that if the third season of Cobra Kai was released at the start of the season. Because, I'm like any red-blooded American. I'm going to watch Cobra Kai over an NFL football game. But, I mean, come on. There's really not much to watch on TV. And the political process is a joke. I mean, it looks like people would flock to watching this. I actually watched Sunday, all 3 games, just because I could. There wasn't nothing else on. But I find myself, like the Stanley Cup finals start tomorrow. I don't find myself caring. The NBA playoffs are down to the Final Four. And I would like to say, I think the only person in the freaking world to pick the Denver Nuggets to win it all and to beat the Boston Celtics in the finals was me. Correct, Sam?
Correct. That's correct. I had to go back and watch that video all over again. So I was like, there's no way he actually did that. And I went back and I watched it. And I was like, oh, my God, he actually did. But
yeah, because I'm pretty much brilliant. So maybe I'm as smart as Stephen A. Smith. But, I mean, I don't know. I think there's a serious issue with sports. And I think everything that's happened with the coronavirus, do you think maybe no preseason and not really the access fans have had before the NFL camps had something to do with it?
I'll say this, the no preseason, I was surprised when week 1 came around because I didn't even realize it was week 1 until I opened my phone one day and it said week 1. So I think that's part of the reason. I think people just didn't – there's no ramp up to it. There's no lead up to it. There's no hype machine building up the season. There was just nothing. It felt like we were kind of just dropped in the middle of it. So I think it definitely played a role in what's happening right now.
Plus, I think just the game itself is much softer. And I think there's also a distrust on if what we're seeing is legit on the field when it comes to officiating.
Well, you brought up the numbers the other day. And certainly, I think the NFL has said before they've emphasized or de-emphasized different things in the past. That's not entirely shocking to me. But at the same point, I think there are people who are getting tired of – I mean, if they just pick something and just stick with it, I think it'd be a little bit more acceptable. People are getting tired sometimes of the shifting ways they're managing the game.
How about this, Sam? As a Steelers fan, can you tell me a game where you really thought the Steelers got screwed?
I would say the Jesse James catch, but that really wasn't a catch, so no, I don't think so.
So in your entire life, you've never seen a Steelers game where you thought we got screwed. Have you seen a Steelers game where you thought, ooh, we got away with one there?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, definitely.
Some Super Bowls too, huh, Sam?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I was kind of thinking – well, I've been thinking about that call a little bit, but yeah, that's kind of –
Well, see, I'm a Bengals fan. I could go all the way back to probably 1980 when the Bengals were getting screwed by calls. So – that's kind of the problem. If you're a Green Bay Packer fan, not a whole lot of attention there. And if you're a Dallas Cowboy fan, the only issue you have is when you play the Green Bay Packers. You remember the year Calvin Johnson got screwed over and Detroit didn't beat Dallas. All the Dallas fans are laughing their asses off, and then they have to go to Green Bay and they get screwed in Green Bay, and Green Bay wins. Yeah. And hey, Green Bay played the Steelers in the Super Bowl that year. Sam, didn't that work out good?
Oh yeah, that worked out great. I was so happy about that. Favorite game of all time.
So. And then when you play Green Bay in the Super Bowl, things aren't going to turn out well usually. Unless you're John Elway and you've been everybody's darling to win a Super Bowl finally, and then magically you win the Super Bowl. Ray Lewis's last year, magically they win the Super Bowl. It just seems weird sometimes. And I don't know, have you ever heard of Dan Modella?
No, I don't think so.
It's either Dan Modella or Modella. But
Modea, maybe. I think Modea sounds more familiar.
I think like Modea or something. But he was a writer that wrote about this in the early 70s about the mob connections to the NFL and how every original ownership for an NFL team had connections to the mafia. And they actually had games in the 50s and 60s and 70s that he had listed that were proven to be fixed or point shaved. And if you look at how much that happened back then, I don't know why people don't think it can happen right now. And I'm not saying it does. Maybe the NFL officials are just incompetent, which is always possible. That's what I always like to hope to think. But when it seems to always favor the Packers, the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Seattle, unless Seattle's playing one of those teams, it always seems a little weird. And I'll still go back to before Super Bowl 23. I had a buddy of mine. that ran on a Frito-Lay truck that was going to the Super Bowl, and he had a friend that asked him and said, "Hey, you going to the Super Bowl?" Because he knew he was a Bengals season ticket holder. He said, "Yeah." And the guy said, "Why do that? You already know you're going to lose." And my buddy said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because you ever noticed the big market always wins the Super Bowl." And if you look back, the big market or the team that had the best story almost always has won the Super Bowl. The only cases I can think of where they didn't is where they just got beat so bad that nothing could be done about it, like a few years ago when Seattle beat up Peyton Manning in Denver. Nothing you can do with officials there to fix the game. So I'm not saying that the players are fixed. I'm sure there have been players that have thrown stuff before, but I still think as much money is involved in gambling, I find it really hard to think that everything we see, sports in its entirety, is on the up and up. I mean, look at the NBA referee who admitted to point shaving games, and that was just a few years back. So
yeah, that was back early 2000s, so it's not like it's been that long.
Yeah, so when people see that and you see the officiating calls, and then you start to question if what you see is really on the up and up, I mean, and then you see the way the NFL treats retired players with the CTE and everything. You see the way they treated Colin Kaepernick. You see now the way they treat criminals by putting them on the back of helmets. And I mean, it really makes you wonder what in the hell's going on here. And I think that they have done so much flying in the wind here, trying to appease everybody. The old saying is, if you try to make everybody happy, the only thing you're going to do is piss everybody off. And I think the NFL has successfully pissed everybody off over the last 20 years.
No, I agree with you on that part. They definitely have kind of angered a little bit of everyone. And the issue is that they've never stood for anything pretty much. They've always kind of changed sides. They've never really picked a side. They've never stood by the players until they stand by the players and they pick someone else off. I mean, it's just what they do. They never find a solid ground to stand on. And it's what it comes down to. So at some point, your brand is going to suffer because of it.
Yeah, it's just like the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's the name they put on the back of their helmets?
Honestly, I didn't even read the names. I don't know what either names were.
Something, but he is a guy that was in a drive-by shooting. He had the gunpowder on his hand when they picked him up after they shot him. And they pulled his car over. He took off running. The guy in the back seat's firing at the cops. They shoot him. And then everybody's going to riot because they shot him. And now we're going to put him on the back of a helmet, even though he was in a drive-by shooting, and we're going to see if we can get people to look up to him. That's what we're going to use for the face of social injustice? When you have Alejandro Villanueva, who puts Alwyn Cash on the back of there, and Cash is a guy that was a freaking hero in the military. He was an African-American. That guy's name should be on the back of everybody's helmet just to show what things are supposed to be. I was impressed by Bill Belichick. If you saw on his visor, he had the name Fritz Pollard. I mean, Fritz Pollard was one of the first African-American players in NFL history in 1918, 1920, and added a lot to the game and why the game has turned out to what it's been. What I would really like to see, I know the social justice is the big thing, but how about this? Why don't all the NFL players, each NFL player, put the name of Junior Seau or Ricky Dixon or Andre Waters? Put that name on the back of your helmet. Honor the guys that came before you, that basically gave their lives when the NFL allowed it to happen, and they didn't care if you got hit in the head. Why don't we honor those guys? And the Alwyn Cashes. Let's honor people that are actually heroes. All right? Because I'm telling you this, a police officer that's being shot at from the back of a car that sees a guy run down the street, I'm going to shoot him. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the fact that we're going to glorify that by putting it on the back of a Pittsburgh Steelers helmet.
Yeah, you're probably going to call me soft. I wouldn't shoot someone in the back if I didn't see they had a weapon. But at the same point, I'm just saying, cops have before you got me. Okay. Cops have the right to protect themselves. Cops absolutely have the right to protect themselves.
And you have the right to protect yourself. And the problem is that you know how quickly it takes a guy to go from running away from you to turning and shooting you.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
You got a guy firing 13 shots at you. You're probably not really trying to see if this guy has a weapon or not. You're probably assuming that he has a weapon. And I think that's a pretty safe assumption that he did. And the bad thing is they're honoring him. And when they end up arresting the guy that's shooting out of the back of the car for the drive-by shooting, they found gun residue on the dude that's running his hand, which, I mean, if he was doing a drive-by shooting, I don't care if you shoot him wherever. I don't give a damn if it's in the back. He needs to be taken out. But underneath his, car seat on the driver's side is a gun. So, I mean, chances are the only reason he didn't have his gun is because the cops pulled him over and he took off running. And here we go. Anti-war chief. I like that name, by the way. NFL is entertainment, not classified as competitive sport. They were tax exempt, showing. Yeah, that's true. The NFL was completely tax exempt up until the last decade. I mean, Congress passed that in the early 1960s. And if you look at it, the NFL is pretty much the same thing as WWE. And people buy it. And we talk about it because it's the only way I can get paid right now in the pandemic. So. But it's why I know the Bengals probably ain't ever going to win anything unless Joe Burrow is the second coming of I don't know what. Joe Montana. He might be from what I've seen. But my guess is this. If he is, there is a decent shot the NFL will do something to make sure by year 4 or 5 he's in New York or LA.
Yeah, or the Bengals will just not put an offensive line in front of him.
Hey, the NBA, I mean, is real good at that now. You know, the Lakers get stacked. The Miami Heat get stacked. You know, the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Would you rather play in Cleveland or would you rather play in Miami?
Yeah, and the thing is this, the Cleveland Cavaliers were never stacked. But as soon as he wanted to go somewhere, they stacked the Heat for him. They stacked the Lakers for him. They stacked the Clippers. When the hell is somebody going to stack the Memphis Grizzlies?
They're not going to do that because players don't want to go to Memphis.
And it doesn't matter if they want to go. The NBA doesn't want them to go. You know, they want guys to go to Brooklyn now. Yeah, New York, big city. So now we're going to stack that with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, all of them guys. You see,
if they want to really stack New York, they would have put a bunch of help in the Knicks. They would have given them a high draft picks. They haven't given Knicks a good lottery draft pick in years.
Yeah, but the thing is this: Brooklyn's stacked. And I mean, the thing is this: Brooklyn has better ownership than the Knicks. Brooklyn has the newer facility than the Knicks, even though Madison Square Garden's the mecca of pretty much all sports, no matter what sport it is outside of baseball or football. And I mean, really, Madison Square Garden, I think 1934, the NFL championship game was played there on a small field. So, I mean, almost everything's been done. I mean, hell, Hitler had a rally there. Not that that's a good thing, but he did. You know, Elvis Presley sang there. Frank Sinatra sang there. Everybody's been in Madison Square Garden. But I think since Kevin Durant wanted to go to Brooklyn, he went to Brooklyn. They're fine with that because it's still New York. It's still going to do big numbers. And let's face it, I mean, if Brooklyn's really good, a lot of Knicks fans are probably just going to say hell with them and go watch the other team from New York just win it.
Probably. I mean, but yeah, honestly, Knicks fans are fed up with the ownership as is. Knicks fans are fed up with their team as it is.
Yeah, and I think anti-war chief, sorry, Steve, has to be our, guy that chimes in, the man of the day, because I don't think it could be said better than what he said, which is this is entertainment. John Aikman. We got to get John on the show. I think he just sends me Instagram messages and he doesn't know that Shelley is in charge of running that. And I never hardly see him except for every once in a while. Yeah, I agree with John that I think John's got a picture of a different man on there because what I remember, John, he's not that handsome. But he says, I think Steve Nash is going to bring a lot to Brooklyn. I think he will too. John, if you're listening right now, I know he's always asking every once in a while if he can come on the show, but if he wants, he can come on Monday and talk about the games that we see over this weekend. So, John, just hit me up. You got my phone number, or you can message us on here. But I think Nash is a great thing to bring to Brooklyn. But I will just wrap the show by saying this. I am the person that picked the Denver Broncos and the Denver Nuggets. And, well, the Broncos got just as close as the New York Knicks did to get into the NBA or to the Super Bowl. So I did pick Denver to play Boston in the finals.
You did.
Now, even if they both come up short now, that's still a pretty damn good pick. Since
you got getting the Nuggets that far is still pretty good.
But, all right, we're going to wrap it up. You can follow Sam Teets at Sam Teets 33. Sam, anything else you want to add before we go?
No, I think we hit about everything. I think we got all the points we wanted to cover.
All right. You can follow me at Grilling Truth. You can hear all of our shows podcast form every day on pretty much any place that has podcasts, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, over 300 different outlets. You can watch our video show on the NFL every day, Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitch, Periscope, and some other places I can never remember because they're not up on that little thing above my thing that shows it because it only shows like 5 places. But we will be back on Monday. And also, we have the Cincinnati Bengals weekly show every 9 o'clock Wednesday night with me Ty Robbins, and former Cincinnati Bengal linebacker Joe Kelly. So make sure you check out there. Also, if you're a Bengals fan or you just like to watch, car crashes and me complain about coaching, we do that every Wednesday night, like clockwork. We have for 6 years now for the Cincinnati Bengals Weekly Show. But we will be back on 1 o'clock on Monday to preview the Raiders Saints and to look back at all the games from the week. But for now, replenishing Carrot Technologies, rcandt.com. So for now, for Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.